We have seen a lot of new gear this year. Some of it has been really good and some of it not so much. So now that the year is winding down and we're entering into the shopping season, I thought I'd do a list of the top 5 best and the top 5 worst pieces of gear that came out this year. So counting down from 5, the 5th best piece of gear this year is the Zimbivy double bed. I have loved my Zimbivy sleep system and was excited when they started offering a double bed for trips where my wife and I go together. Zimbivy is probably the best quilt that I've used, and the double was perfect for a recent trip with my wife. Only reason this isn't higher on my list is because I don't get to hike with my wife as often as I would like, which makes this a kind of specialized piece of gear. Other than that, I absolutely love it. The Big Agnes copper spur, on the other hand, I'm not as impressed with. It was updated for 2022 and it's a really nice tent, which is why it's only 5th worst on my list. My main complaint is the 43-inch wide floor that cannot accommodate 2 wide pads. In my mind, that makes this just a one-person tent that could have easily fit 2 with just a few more inches in the floor. So I wasn't all that impressed with the Outdoor Vitals vintage jacket when I first got it, but I started wearing it around town out of convenience, and the more that I wore it, the more I really started to like it. I have both the pullover and the full zip Ventus, but prefer the convenience of the full zip better. It's a super light, warm, and comfortable jacket that is quickly becoming one of my favorites, making this the 4th best piece of new gear this year. The 4th worst piece of gear this year is the Big Agnes Lost Ranger Ultralight Sleep System. This is a 3-in-1 bag that uses layering to achieve 3 different temperature ratings. You can go down to 45 degrees Fahrenheit, 20 degrees Fahrenheit, or even 0 degrees depending on how many layers you use. My biggest complaints are that only one configuration is ISO certified, and this thing is pretty expensive at $650, which just doesn't make it worth it in my book. Something you never hear about on a list like this is socks and underwear. But socks and underwear are foundational pieces of gear for backpackers. We literally couldn't do what we do without them. And the main thing you need to make sure of is that you aren't wearing your cotton socks and underwear out in the backcountry. Make sure you get synthetic. I prefer boxer briefs like these from Bombas, who also happens to be this week's sponsor. Boxer briefs keep my inner thighs from rubbing against each other, causing chafing while I hike, and the synthetic material wicks away moisture and helps protect me against hypothermia. The same is true of socks. I prefer synthetic socks that wick away moisture and keep my feet dry. Bombas socks have this honeycomb stitching that aid in arch support, and they have no seam across the toe that helps prevent blisters where the seam might rub. But the best thing about Bombas is for every pair of socks or underwear you buy, 1 pair is donated to someone experiencing homelessness. So not only do you get an awesome foundational piece of gear, but you get to help someone in need. Use the code MyLifeOutdoors for 20% off your next order. Now, if you've seen some of my other videos, then you know that I'm not a big fan of the new LifeStraw Peak Series filter. This filter seems like a weak attempt to compete against the Katadyn Be Free. The only problem is, if you use the filter inside the bag, you can't filter past the hole in the bottom of the filter. So, if you switch the filter to the outside of the bag, it fixes that problem. Just don't try to put it back, or the dirty end of this filter will be dangerously close to your mouth, risking cross-contamination. It really just seems like they didn't quite think this design through, and instead just quickly try to come out with something to catch up with their competition, which is why the LifeStraw Peak Series is the 3rd worst piece of gear this year. The Nemo insulated tensor was updated this year to include a 4.2 R value that will keep you warm in all but the coldest temperatures. There are several mattresses that are this warm, but there are only 2 companies that are using metallic film inside the mattress to reflect heat back towards you. This keeps weight low and warmth high. And out of the 2 companies that use this technology, Nemo is the most comfortable. That's why the insulated tensor is not only my favorite sleeping pad, but comes in at the 2nd best piece of gear on my list. The 2nd worst piece of gear is the new MSR Free Light tent. I really wanted to like this tent because it's got a 50-inch wide floor, unlike the copper spur. It's lightweight at just over 2 pounds, and they were thinking out of the box with things like the diagonal zipper across the fly. This keeps you from having to fold yourself in half to get out of the tent. But it's that diagonal zipper that allows water to drip into the tent anytime your fly is wet. Water in your tent is simply unacceptable to me, which is why it's the 2nd worst piece of gear on my list. Strangely, even though the MSR Hubba Hubba has the same design, water doesn't drip into the tent because the ceiling extends out further, pushing the zipper out of the way of the floor, so there's no dripping in the tent. So if you're going to buy an MSR tent, go with the Hubba Hubba, not the Free Light. Okay, the #1 absolute best piece of new gear this year is the lightest fully enclosed tent on the market, the Z-Pax Plex Solo. This tent has become my favorite this year because it's a major amazingly lightweight at 13.7 ounces, and it's got plenty of room for one person plus gear, even on a 25-inch wide pad. Anytime I'm hiking solo and when I don't have other gear to test and review, the Plex is my tent of choice. It's not cheap at almost $600, but tents this light aren't cheap. And now, that brings me to the absolute worst piece of new gear this year, and that is the brand new Get Out Gear Trek chair. I really wanted to like this chair because it introduces an overdue concept into the backpacking world, using trekking poles as part of the chair frame to help reduce the overall weight of the chair. But not only is the Trek chair heavier than the Helinox Chair Zero high back that doesn't need trekking poles, but the chair's front pull hub keeps snapping. I did a video about this just last week, and since that video, Get Out Gear sent me a replacement frame. Unfortunately, that frame was accidentally assembled with two front pull hubs, the same hub that keeps failing. Even though I had to take apart the new frame to swap out the hubs, this allowed me to test the frame a total of 3 times, and I'm sorry to say, but the frame failed 3 times. The main problem seems to be when you lean back on 2 legs in the chair, which, as long as you're super careful and never lean back, and you never place a chair on uneven ground, you might be okay. But realistically, this hub needs to be redesigned to withstand lateral torque. Until that happens, this is the worst piece of new gear this year. 2 honorable mentions are the new Durston Kakwa 40 and the Durston X-Mid Pro 2. The only reason I didn't include these 2 amazing pieces of gear in my main list is because you can't get either of them right now due to high demand and supply chain issues. But I wanted to mention them here at the end because the X-Mid Pro 2 is truly an amazing tent with a unique geometric design, and the Kakwa 40 is my favorite pack right now. 2 awesome pieces of gear that you simply can't buy till next year sometime. Other than that, this has been the top 5 best and the top 5 worst pieces of gear this year. If you decide to buy one of these pieces of gear, please do so through the link in the description. I'll earn a small commission at no additional cost to you. Please like, subscribe, and do all those other things. And as always, thanks for watching.